Hello everybody. So I have several projects running concurrently, and I'm going to take a short break from doing videos of the VR project because I got a VR helmet and I can't figure out how to get it to work right. It's mostly because I have weird hardware apparently. That said, let's hop on back over to the SpaceTech project, which you might remember me showing off maybe a month ago. So everything looks very different now because I have completely changed the way that I create parts. Back then, I had gotten stuck on how I would make it so you could build things in the game world in a natural and easy way, and I was working with this hardpoint system where you clicked on hardpoints, and it felt very rigid, and I didn't like it. I wanted to have ships that felt a little bit more like they would be at home in a really, really nice game where the ships all have these elegant shapes that are custom made rather than just being voxels that get pasted together. So that's what I've gone and done. Right now, there are very few constraints. As long as objects are touching, they can get stitched together. And that means that you can have objects that overlap each other, but there are a couple of game mechanics that make that unwise because all damage is done via radius effect. So if everything's clustered together and overlapping, any damage that you take will affect all of those parts. And it's not just combat damage. As you know, my games are not generally combat heavy. It's also wear and tear and stuff like that. That in mind, let's take a quick look at the kinds of parts that I've started to use. I've come up with a couple of basic philosophies for parts. One philosophy is if your part has a simple shape, such as a tube or a box or a circle, it should be something that can be repeated. So here you can see I've got an array of tubes. And here you can see I've got an array of engines. And here you can see I've got an array of tubes and an array of fins and an array of blue glowy things. And so you can come up with simple shapes that can be repeated, and it'll form you a motif. It'll form a motif for your ship, and you can get a really, really nice pattern to it. And I think that it looks pretty decent when you have these simple shapes patterned like this. However, I also like having more complicated shapes. So for example, I have a variety of wing-like shapes. These wing-like shapes are great because they can be deployed horizontally, or they can be deployed vertically. Either way, they provide you with a nice structure to your ship. A structure that normally projects out from your center of mass. So you've got the central body of your ship that provides the core silhouette, and then you've got these wing-like objects that come out of it. Now in the fighter version, wings are literally wings, but that didn't make very much sense in this Corvette system, so I didn't have any actual wings. Instead, I've got this jump drive, which happens to be shaped like one. And if I made more parts, there would be more projections that were shaped like that. And then I have another kind of shape, and that is the core shape. These core shapes are large armored pieces that have a lot of core functionality in them. For example, this produces a tremendous amount of power, and this produces a tremendous amount of thrust. So you can get a lot of performance out of them, and because they're heavy and armored, they generally go towards the center of your ship, and they can take a lot of beating. And you can even use a trick I'll talk about later to go and make them pressurized on the inside, and you can go in and repair them without getting out of your ship. But these require a little bit of work. These aren't simply cool-looking shapes that you build just for kicks. Instead, what happens is you need to have a shape that can be deployed in a variety of ways. It needs to be able to deploy with either side up, and it needs to be able to deploy forwards or backwards. With the exception of things like engines, which have an obvious backside. But even the engines can be deployed like this, like this, like this, or like this. So there's a lot of variation. But the shapes that you use are specific. And this is the secret. Every time that you build a core object, you're going to want to try and include a couple of distinct shapes. The first is the valley. This valley is an excellent shape for adding a lot of cool density to your ship. It makes it so that your ship doesn't look like a giant block of rock, but it also adds body to your ship. I think that they look absolutely great. So you can see that I've got a valley here, and I've also got a valley there. Flat surfaces are perfect for mounting things on, so I've got a flat surface here, and I mounted stuff on it. I've also got a flat surface across the top of the engine block, and I mounted stuff on that. In addition to that, we also have the curved area. We've got the bulging outwards area. There it is. And the bulging outwards area is good for creating a mass, a density to your ship that is just flat out heavy. And if you look over here, you can see that this ship feels quite heavy because it has this bulge shape built straight up into the top like that. But I didn't want that heaviness in this ship, so I flipped it over and I used the V shape, which gave it body without giving it heaviness. Obviously, you still get the shape down here underneath, so there's always some fun trying to optimize that. And the last shape that you'll want to include is a projection. So on the front of this, I have a projection, and as you can see, it gets narrower and thinner. That allows you to connect it up to the rest of the ship just by bumping up, and you can see how good that looks. It just kind of merges straight into the rest of the ship. Since we don't care about overlaps, they're not illegal, we do have to make it so that our connections feel very natural. The other thing to consider is that the back of these modules, I haven't decided on the perfect way to do it yet. There is an argument for a concave box-like shape, basically like a box with a scoop taken out of it, because those look pretty good on the back of your ship. But I haven't really decided to do that yet, partially because the backs of my ships are engines, and that's the way it's going to stay for the foreseeable future. Because my shapes have a distinct, because my core pieces have distinct shapes built into them, they can be used in a variety of ways, and you can even repeat the same core object. So if we needed a staggering amount of power, we could simply duplicate this core object and then use it however we want. We could back it up like this, and due to the way that I've got it built, there's very little Z-fighting problems. Or we could flip it over and use the other side to give us a different sort of look to our ship. And it's not, there's no feeling that we are repeating things over and over and over. It feels like our ship just got more massive. And that's what I was going for. Just like the boxes, these need to be repeatable for large ships. The last piece of the puzzle was the habitable zones, and I'm not 100% sure that I've got this right. Pressurized areas are unique because they can't really be scaled, and they have to be properly connected. To show you what I mean, this is the cockpit, and the insides are just mocked up right now, so don't take them as anything serious. But back here we've got this hallway, which has a small room and a large room and an airlock. And then if we keep marching back, we enter into this area, which has an elevator and another airlock and 2 large rooms. But because all of these are specifically scaled for the human body, and they have doors that are specifically open to each other, we need to actually connect these up door to door, and we can't scale them or rotate them. I mean, we can scale or rotate the first one, but after that, no, we can't even scale them. We can rotate the first one, but after that, everything gets locked door to door. Because of that, these habitable zones are the unchanging part of your design, and they're going to be something that shows up in every single ship, and they're always going to be pointed the same way. They're always going to be the same size. They're probably always going to be in the front. So what I've been trying to do is make it so that you can turtle them. You can turtleneck them. And what that means is that you can do things like this, where we've got the power piece sliding up underneath. And that means that it doesn't look quite the same, even though they're the same core pieces. And over here, this got in the way. Oh, it just scaled funny. This used to be scaled, and I unscaled it for some reason. There we go. So over here, for example, we have this cargo container going underneath and a strut moving backwards along the underside to break up the profile. But I have some work left to do in how to conceal that stuff. Fighters were the same thing. I came up with a couple of ways of concealing the cockpit using a turtling strategy, where you hide the cockpit in another object or partially in another object. The problem with that is that when you walk through these areas, you're going to end up with seeing the stuff that's poking through. Oh, this one's actually clear, so I guess it's not a problem with that one. But you're going to end up with stuff, here, this for example. That's not what the floor is supposed to look like. That's the power core. Well, the good news is that this is actually very easy to fix, because in the end, the interiors of these spaceships are going to be a different set of models, and they'll only be rendered when you're inside the spaceship. But because they are a different set of models, what we can do is we can render them with priority. So you wouldn't see this green stuff because there is an interior floor, and the interior floor has priority even though it's further back. That's a simple shader trick, or multi-camera trick, however you want to do it, that allows us to not worry too much about overlap. So even though this reactor is technically poking into our living space, we would never see it, and to us it's just on the other side of the floor. The advantage of this is that we can then deploy various kinds of hallways, maintenance hallways, that just kind of move through the ship. And they're connected by doors in the same way that, this stuff is. But we could just go here. We could be like, oh no, our reactor's been damaged. Okay, well, I'll just pop open this floor panel and futz around with the circuitry in the floor panel to repair it. I don't have to go outside and drill stuff, as long as the damage isn't too bad. Because of that, we can have habitable areas that actually punch straight through other components that are, big, heavy components like these. And obviously that would be something that you wouldn't normally think of. It's like you're going to have a pressurized area inside your reactor core. Well, sure. Why not? Because you've built the reactor core around the pressurized area for all intents and purposes. You're inside the ship, you're walking around, you don't see a giant wall of reactor. You see a bank of standard wall brackets where you can change circuitry and fix stuff and repair stuff and monitor stuff, and never have to go outside if you don't want to. There are a lot of tricks that I have up my sleeve for what the gameplay is behind this. It's sort of a cross between, The Sims and an actual space game, not a combat one, but I don't know if you've ever played any of those old school exploring games where you've got a spaceship and you're wandering around the cosmos. There were a couple of Star Trek games like that, although they got washed away by the Star Trek Strategic Command games, and later on by the Spock punches everyone while screaming Star Trek games. But anyway, you want to cut it, there are a lot of kinds of gameplay that we can get out of this that aren't blasty, guns. I don't have anything against blasty, guns, but it's pretty easy to optimize a ship for blasty, guns. And I'd like to have you want to optimize your ship for other things. Science, habitability, chatting with people. Also, notice that there are no armor plates. I forgot to build them. I think that the armor plates would be a great way to break up the profile of the habitable areas, especially since they're what you would put armor plates around. I just didn't think of it until I started the video, so there are no armor plates. This isn't an armor plate. This is an ice exhaust. I thought of a really cool heatsink idea. I can hit play and show you. So this is one of the things that you probably won't see in any other kind of sci-fi game. The particle effect is temporary, but the basic idea here is blackbody radiation is very, very limited. So you get heat sinks. Most space stations and spaceships use just heat sinks that point out into the depths of space, and heat steadily radiates out of them using a formula called blackbody radiation. But that's there's a pretty nasty cap on that. It's all surface area oriented. It looks ugly. It's just not interesting on a ship in a space game. So what I've come up with is you use your waste water or waste gel or whatever you have that you have extra of, and you coat a fin with it and ice it up. And then when you pump heat through, it boils away. But what you've done, cleverly, you are very clever, you've charged the goo or the water. and the whole thing is drawn back to you once it cools. So it boils off into space, and it creates this vast cloud of hot water or hot gel or whatever that counts as a blackbody radiation surface that's, dozens or hundreds of times the size of your ship. But because it's charged, once it cools enough, it'll get drawn right back to your ship, and you won't end up actually losing very much of your goo. So you're not just spraying water off into the depths of space. You're reclaiming it afterwards and reusing it. And I think it looks neat. This is obviously a prototype idea. I don't think it'll look like that in the final version of the game. But the basic idea is pretty sound. You boil off the liquid, and you end up with a massive, massive blackbody radiation pool, so that you don't have to have your ship covered in just these shiny panels, and instead you can just let off fog whenever things start to get rough. Of course, it's kind of an obvious thing to do, and it makes you a little bit easy to notice. Anyway, that's what I've been working on recently. Let me know if you have any opinions. And I'm going to go back to not doing YouTube videos until I get stuff figured out. Oh, the VR emotion stuff. I have a great way to do it, but I recorded 5 videos about it, and I didn't like how unclear it was. So I have to come up with a simpler way to do it. Unless I want to distribute that library on the asset store or something. Have a good one.